This is Public Voice. I'm Scott Feschuk, and I'm here with Richard Florida. We've entered a phase now that economists are describing in technical terms as run for your life. And I know that a lot of people are advocating a return to very traditional ideas of stimulus to get us out of this mess. You don't agree with that, and I'd be interested to know why.
Oh, it's really interesting that you asked me that question today, Scott, because I'm agonizing over a piece I'm writing for the Atlantic Monthly on just this. We are in the midst of this isn't just your run-of-the-mill recession. I mean, as of yesterday, we know this thing has been going on. The National Bureau of Economic Research in the United States finally kind of woke up and said, oh, this has been going on for a year now, which is already longer. We don't even think we're in the worst of it. It's already longer than the 10-month average, already 2 months longer. And I think the longest crisis on record is from the 30s. It's 40-some months. This is a big deal. And what we're doing is, this isn't a typical business cycle. We are shifting from an old industrial economic system to a new knowledge, idea-driven, I call it creative system. A system that no longer creates wealth by what you can do with your backs and your brawn and your leg. And I say that as a guy whose father worked in a factory for more than 50 years. My dad, age 13, age 65, worked in a factory. It's now what happens in your mind. What are the new things you can invent? Media, entertainment, technology, healthcare, education. And the stimulus is just aimed at propping up the old order. What do they want to stimulate? Bail out housing mortgages. And the great one there is they're going to bail you out if you currently owe more than 90% and are paying more than 40% of your income. Hello? You're spending 40% of your income on housing. What else can you buy? And then we're going to bail out the car industry. And it seems to me that what we should be doing, when we move from an agriculture to an industrial economy, we made food, most people spent most of their money on food and clothing. We made those things really cheap. Like, we went from having 90% of our people doing agriculture to now 2 or 3% of our people doing agriculture. And we made clothing even cheaper. And then people had enough money to buy a house and a car. It seems to me that right now when we talk about stimulus, we should be thinking about how do we make the house and the car less expensive. Now, the bubble's going to help with that. As the bubble deflates, it's going to make housing less expensive. Lucky me, who just bought a house in Toronto. But I think what we have to be doing is investing in our future. And that's hard to know. But I think a couple things. We have to make housing cheaper and better. We have to move away from the mass dependence on the single-family home and have more people be in rental housing. We have to provide that more affordably. We have to move to new forms of transportation, which are not just a car and not just light rail. Like, we have to bring people closer to where they work so people use their feet, walk to work, and ride bikes to work.
And yeah, we seem to be moving in the opposite direction.
No, it's terrifying. And we have to make we have to expand healthcare and make healthcare more wide. It's so funny to read the paper and hear what they're saying. We have to make healthcare cheaper and we have to cut back the hospitals. No. If we want to extend life and give people a better quality of life, we have to make more healthcare, and we have to develop people better by developing better educational systems, which aren't these mass institutions, which allow people to find what they want to do, and whether that's a coach or a teacher, your own teacher or mentor. And we have to make quality of life better. That's where we have to head. So it seems to me that the stimulus we have to do if we're going to pour precious government resources is figuring out how we're going to build this new economy and new society. The place that figures that out first will be the winner. The place that try to forestall the inevitable will be the losers.
It's not unusual for politicians and politics to be behind this kind of thinking. They seem to not even be registering it right now, though. What are the challenges there in terms of getting that kind of thinking adopted and on the public policy agenda?
It's almost giant amnesia, and this is what I don't scare easily. And this is what scares me about the current crisis, is because our mental models and our thinking are so out of touch. They think it's a replay of the 1930s. We spend some government money, we free up interest rates, we do a little Keynesian, they call it a Keynesian stimulus. We are shifting economic models, and in this sense, our period is much more like the middle 19th century, when these new industries were just emerging. We're in this kind of the equivalent period of the building of the Erie Canal, before the building of the railroads. So we've got to figure out what this new thing looks like and invest in it. And yeah, I think politicians are just, and policy advisors and economists are just so wedded to the past. Keynes said the thing, we need to fear most is old, outmoded ideas. And I think that's what's really got me worried, is that it's very hard for policymakers and economic advisors and politicians to see where we need to go. So instead of building a new thing, Paul Romer once said a crisis is a terrible thing to waste. Instead of building a new thing, we're trying to, reinflate and breathe life back into this old thing that has really outlived its usefulness.
And it's not just the public policy agenda, it's culture too. You talk about homes. I mean, for everybody that I know, myself, you're raised to strive to own your own home. And that might not be the best model going forward for the economy.
One of my students here in Toronto said something really funny. He had always heard the American dream. The American dream was, it's a Canadian dream too, but he said American dream was to own your own house. Then he looked it up on like Wikipedia and it said, the ability to achieve economic opportunity and the dream of what you want to be in life. And he said, I think those two things are in conflict now. The house has become such a deadweight anchor that people are spending 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% of their income. It just toppled. The largest economy in the world was just toppled by bad mortgages. So maybe we need to rethink this and realize that mass single-family home ownership only became a reality after the Great Depression. We invented that with tax policy and policies to stretch mortgage terms, and whole new banking systems and Fannie Mae's and Freddie Mac's, which traded the mortgages. I think we have to reinvent the way we house people. And in my view, we have to make housing much cheaper. You or me or anyone else should be able to get a house that we like flexibly and affordably and much cheaper than we have to pay today. Moreover, if we change our jobs, and I think about people in Windsor, people who are the auto industry is having its struggles. Well, maybe the right thing for them to do is be able to move to Toronto or Vancouver or wherever. People in Detroit able to move to Chicago or to Atlanta or to San Francisco. But they're tied to these houses, so-called underwater, like a deadweight anchor. So maybe what we need to do is have people rent more, make those rentals very and nice. Not, a lot of people want a single-family house because they think it's a dream and it's beautiful and they can fix it up and put nails in the wall. Make the rental house that way. You can lease any car you want. Mm-hmm. Why can't you lease any kind of house you want? I think the advantages of that would be is people could come in and provide a lot of rental housing instead of having these, mom and pop contracting shops and you have to call for an electrician or a plumber. If you had the ability to flexibly lease property, and if you move from Toronto to Vancouver or Hamilton to change or if you change your job in Toronto and you're working out in the suburbs and then you move downtown, or vice versa, you're working downtown and move to the suburbs, you could quickly change where you live. You can say, no, I want to have a unit closer to where I live. It'll reduce transit pressure, it'll reduce transportation and congestion, and it can make housing more affordable. I think at least we need to entertain the idea of this kind of system-wide shift.
What role does diversity play in all this in terms of the population of the city?
Well, I've been reflecting on this in the article that I'm writing, and I'm reflecting on what happens to the whole geography of capitalism in the crisis, but what happens at the top? What happens to the New Yorks and the Londons, the financial apexes, if you will? And what I've concluded is New York and London have the least to worry about, and I think Toronto too, I put Toronto in that, the least to worry about that of any cities because they're diverse. They have diverse economies. They're not just financial centers. They do media and entertainment and ideas and fashion and services, but they also are diverse in terms of their people. And what I found, not only in the current era, diverse places are more innovative, they give rise to more ideas, they attract better talent, but all through human history. The places that were the most open to diversity have the greatest waves of growth. So I think when we look at this in a time of crisis, the places that are going to survive the best, that are going to be able to reinvent themselves, are the ones that have the greatest diversity. That's why I'm not as worried. Like some people are just absolutely paranoid. New York and London and Toronto are going to lose ground to Shanghai or Singapore or Hong Kong. There's going to be this shift to Asia. I think Asia, great at manufacturing, Japanese, fantastic at technology, the best in the world. But in terms of having the open-minded, diverse mosaic of a society that can attract the world's best people, I think the places that will do that will continue to be at the cutting edge. And that's kind of the big cities in North America.